Hello, Americans. There are important things that you all missed, and that the presidents missed, and that themselves as chiefs missed, and that the leaders of countries A through Z missed, because a breaching method made countries A through Z the only people that could operate their names as locations, areas, and states everywhere the human species body is. It made them blame other things, others, or selves for things that it caused and maintains, including the World Trade Center Predicate Act. Predicate Act, worse than predicate acts, worse than war crimes. Thank God, because the war crime statutes are meeting the appreciations of values going back with subject treatments, exception treatments. These are and through and have been through as systems tactical terror from natures. There have been all kinds of organized crimes at the prisons, needing to hide life progressions for their uses of the location /S remotely by other /S. Use remotely. Oh, it's this company's name. Oh, it's this company's name. People go like that. Then those same people, you try to report something actual. In other words, child abusers, leaders, and kids years apart, first force. There are connections between it as people involved with the World Trade Center attack. Oh, that's not proven. Things aren't proven because you guys can't get on paper. And it will show that A through Z have been used remotely. Certain type of victim /hyper victim. Forgiveness, where forgiveness is not supposed to be, is relative to not leaving out the breaching method. Not leaving out how there were all these other countries involved with people who came through these campuses too. You guys have replaced you guys have self-valued roles replacing what you don't self-value at the same time as evidence. You have self-valued roles replacing what our founders, unnamed founders, because they didn't have security to leave their names behind, except for James Madison's. And they declassified about why and how. But rather than bring that connected to what everyone was saying anyway, that was forced by the breaching method. It was also forced by James Madison's plan. That's why they had the audacity still to pretending that the Civil War was about a tea tax, making people not even realize self-value collusions with the breaching method that had slavery entrenched in northern colonies and southern colonies. Not because you didn't do your homework, because the way it was scripted is sickly distinctly at every campus, but sickly non-distinctly too, to measure and maintain, rather than anyone self-valuing how sickly non-distinctly. In other words, thank God, at countries A through Z, the campuses A through Z, their syntax, they're all locked in at the same time. They can't afford to have with discernible. And all sides of criminal and civil cases, the interbranch and the intelligence tied to them. They can't afford but to only have heard people who would jump up with passion. Oh, in other words, in typing too. In other words, all kinds of medical crap. People say, "Oh, take your meds," but the agencies know that they have recorded criminally foreign influence roles with collusions with the World Trade Center attack. Recorded. WFSB has collusions with them after the World Trade Center attack. That recorded them time collusions with the Saudi attackers. Themselves used remotely. They don't even understand. They can't even have a sane reading of religious books. You guys are missing all the applications by such. A breaching method perfected, making the whole world a bunch of breaching methods. In other words, the human species body of individual bodies has the nature of identity to an extent discernible, and discernibly generating other bodies, other species bodies of individual bodies. And they have group differences like male and female. Two parts of three connected identities of invisible but /hyper invisible but still discernible. 2 ways, 3 ways they are hyper invisible. One of them, not just because it's not there, but it's there with that. As the species body. The species body of its value is right there where the value of male difference and female difference is. And the difference of its difference, apart with that, which everything shows us. Any individual identity of value progression, even nature's, where in other words, it is not, we are shown that we are distinct from other species' bodies. We have black pupils, whites of eyes, distinctly from sharks, but non-distinctly from them. Distinctly from porcupine, but non-distinctly from them. Birds, birds, I think they just have black eyes, but we have that same color eyes. We have two eyes. We have quality aspects of nature distinct from other species' bodies of individual bodies too, but not distinct from them. And we are simultaneous with them, but per a further distinct identity of simultaneous nature. Therefore, I'm referring to it as the hyper-simultaneous. It is also the hyper-invisible, but still discernible. English is more probably and more practically taught this way. Many vaccines. Semi-ancient time, England itself doesn't remember this because through the foundation of modern countries, for example, I believe this is what President Putin or the leader of Russia, Mr. Putin, Vladimir Putin, was trying to say to Tucker Carlson. And we have like a Michael Levine, or I don't know his name. I saw clips of it. But when people they jump in, they say attack that leader's name, or attack Zelensky, or attack Putin. In other words, these are people doing that because they were abused by this breaching that has replaced what our founders communicated to be communicated for the syntax and about the breaching methods that are only allowed to be. They were forced by not just by, but by internationally monitored conversations to measure and maintain northern colonies and southern colonies before America's founders were born. More than 13 colonies were entrenched, and even roles with slavery that no one wanted. There were exceptions made because if anyone spoke up about that, there were internationally monitored conversations that were building on this method to keep everyone abridged from abroad, including the countries that were involved with it, including the international companies that were involved with it. Private criminal enterprises, overt criminal enterprises, terrorists, A through Z affected by this. You came through their schools. They're people with their prisons. They're what they call justice. They've been speaking for justice. They couldn't defend that and afford to have discerned what James Madison had to have declassified. He didn't have free speech. They declassified this. They're getting away with pretending things like that are debatable by having the people who attacked the names of the people of the sciences and the people of the sciences as in collusion. Inside the quality aspect /S and the nature of the /S of debate, like wrongdoers, mass wrongdoing and wrongdoers make opinions about the value of politics relative to this. You don't vote on slavery and pretend you could speak for the Constitution unabridged. You don't leave out the breaching method. You don't force and trick as it's recorded. The experts and the people that have been countering them properly as best they could. There are collusions on both sides of that. Overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and terrorists. See everyone using the words like extremism and radical since the World Trade Center attack. Leading up to the World Trade Center attack, former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, has ongoing collusion /S with some Mendez police involved with trying to plant evidences and bring things before courts to cover up what I caught them doing with the courts, including with sexual medical offenders of kids. And people recorded, you can't make it up. They're recorded, confess, demonstrate, from them, overt criminal enterprises, even if they are intelligence. In other words, there's the only time I know them planting evidences with a John DeMorrow, a Joe DeMorrow, Paul DeMorrow, where DeMorrow's market is now and where it used to be next to Harvard Hospital. These are people with the businesses in the hospital and houses next to that hospital, which is a campus node, hospitals and fire campuses. Also, their families at the same time running to hide life aggressions, to hide to their roles with predicate acts and databases at campuses, but they can't speak about that legitimately. So they've been using the news too to plant evidences at and next to campuses through time. WFSB, since I was a kid, they increasingly have people on Two-Route Highway who will tell you they were influenced to federal evidences crimes with state police families, like an Eric Jensen, involved with the FBI, CIA people with their syntax too on social media. They can't afford to have what's discerned too about the actual value of the readings of statutes and precedents. And a breaching method uses them remotely at countries A through Z. Self-valued collusion such as systems self-valued, tactically abridged from the constitutions, unabridged, from nature's, therefore, unabridged. Why and how we have rights that are too numerous to have to list them, and why and how they are and being haven't been used remotely since they were kids. The names of the peoples of sciences, including of the law, including the difference between the best ones and most evil overtly. There are collusion /s, worse than criminal incompetent, that the courts of Connecticut have as organized criminally foreign influence uses / hyper-criminally foreign influence use /s. We're going to appreciate the hyper-criminally foreign influence too, because it had slavery sickly distinctly northern colonies and southern colonies. So nature itself shows us to appreciate that. But our founders did too. But you guys have our founders' plan, including why our unknown founders had to be left unknown. We're not supposed to pretend it's debatable. Oh, George Washington's our founder. That's not debatable. George Washington left. They declassified for George Washington too about how he was extorted. And when he said it, in other words, he was extorted. And he couldn't go into the detail about it, or he would have been, taken out. There's only an extent of counter /s that everyone can make. To what nature, this breaching method made everyone rolls with what it knew nature would demonstrate negative value nature, progressions, acts, and natures, and itself, while it was demonstrating itself. The scientific value of human fact-shaping nature breaching method is one of the things that all those sick affronts against women, affronts against the difference of black pupils, whites of eyes, of male, female, the difference. The nature of debate, when things pretend to be debatable. They get away with making things pretend to be debatable that are not. And while simultaneously, pretending things. All right, thank you. So in other words, follow my YouTube channel and get them on paper, one name in sequence, the news and interbranch. They have been switching names at the same time. They've been using readings of statutes regarding the validity of what's said on over the media that shows that they are getting over on exceptions in exception nature and have been. It shows that they have had collusion with all natures of crime scenes from their own positions while haven't been used remotely. This is not just in our country, and it's how they're shared and directed to hide how they are shared next to the campuses and with the natures of industries, etc.